Nation, and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley, and this last week we finally got Bill Belichick's debut coaching for UNC. And as our resident Patriots fan, Connor, after that performance, is it safe to say that the dynasty was all on Tom Brady?
No, Bill Belichick is obviously a great NFL coach, one of the best defensive minds we've seen in the sport. I'll just say I think he's past his prime. It's never good when the quarterback you have finishing your game, Max Johnson, is the same age as your girlfriend, Jordan Hudson. Maybe in the NFL with some of the young coaches you have in that league, it's a little bit more acceptable. In college, that's really tough to pull off, and I think it's going to be a long year for Bill Belichick in Carolina this year.
When it comes to the performance and specifically everything involving Jordan Hudson, I think it's one of those things that you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Even if UNC would have had some stellar performance, the Jordan Hudson jokes were always going to roll in. But now seeing what we have, does Bill Belichick have an expiration date in your mind?
As a head coach, I think there's a world where it could very easily be one and done for Belichick, just because that team so obviously, I think, quit during the middle portion of that game where their quarterback, Gio Lopez, who started the game, went over 2 hours without a completion. If things get really ugly this year, the buyout is not very prohibitive, and he could be gone within a year there. So I know Glenn Schumann was someone that was mentioned around that North Carolina job a year ago, probably ends up there if it's not for Belichick. I wouldn't be totally surprised if a year from now, Glenn Schumann is North Carolina's head coach as they try to undo what I think has clearly been the wrong step in terms of hiring Belichick.
The great thing about that game for college football fans, though, is even though North Carolina didn't have an entertaining performance, the storylines around that game were always going to give us entertainment, and it was a tremendous day for the internet. So, bad day for Bill Belichick, great day for college football fans, regardless of the performance. But we've got a lot to get to talking about Georgia football here on today's episode of DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
So as the Dogs move into week 2, so do me and Connor. We're going to focus on some of the things that we would like to see Georgia either improve on or expand on as they take on Austin Peay this weekend. Then with our DawgBites segment, we've got so many things to talk about, including the starting performances from 2 Georgia true freshmen, as well as what we saw from Ryan Puglisi in that first game. We'll follow it up with Meme Machine, which I'm excited to see what everyone has today, just because I think I liked probably 100 tweets from the college football weekend. Then we've got a special guest to join us on today's episode. It's going to be Brandon Adams, and we're going to go through his Dawg Walk video from Saturday and try to help him out with some of the guys that he wasn't able to recognize. And this is harder than it looks, guys. And then touchdown predictions. We'll go over last week's results, and then we'll have new picks for this week. But we'll start with the things that we want to see improved on or expanded on by Georgia in this week 2 game against Austin Peay. Before we do that, Connor, what was your overall assessment or grading of Georgia's performance in week 1?
I think I gave it a B+ in my Sunday recap. There were some things that they could clean up. I didn't think the pass blocking was necessarily great, and we've had some time to digest and figure out why that was the case. You would have liked to see maybe some more explosive downfield passing plays on the afternoon, but I thought they ran the ball incredibly well. They ran for more yards against Marshall than they did against any opponent last year. And I thought this defense looked fierce. And look, they're going to play better offenses. Marshall might be one of the worst teams in college football this season. But they checked the boxes they needed to in terms of starting fast. They were up 21-0 4 possessions into the game and coasted to an easy win where they were able to play a lot of players in this game. I think it was a big 180 from the Marshall game a season ago.
Yeah, I think that B+ is probably the right grade coming out of that. We saw some flashes of good, but also there were some things to be concerned about, especially considering who was on the other side of the field against an opponent like Austin Peay this weekend. I would like us to be having this conversation next week, saying that maybe Georgia was an A- or so. There's got to be some improvements. One of the things that you mentioned was the pass blocking, and I think the offensive line as a whole, the performance didn't impress me as much as I hoped it would have. There were the flashes of good. Georgia ran for 239 yards. Stockton was not sacked at all on the afternoon. But when you look at the pass blocking specifically, this is what I found according to PFF. 2 quarterback hits allowed, 6 pressures total, and 2 batted passes at the line of scrimmage. I know one of the things that Kirby Smart talked about for Gunner headed into week 2 was just trusting more in his offensive line when it came to the passes. So this has got to get better moving forward so that Gunner Stockton can also get better as a passer.
Yeah, and it's interesting as Cody shows us the great video he captured. I think Juan Gaston is such an interesting case study here where, he had a couple viral clips for what he was doing in the running game, but I think he was the weak link in Georgia's pass blocking this past week. And so if they're going to correct this moving forward, they're going to do it without Juan Gaston because I don't expect him to play this week. And so I think when you add in the pass protection issues we saw in week 1, with the injuries as well, Ernest Green leaves the game early on with a back injury. They're having to put Bo Hewley in. They're putting in Daniel Calhoun and Michael Winnie in there at that right guard spot. You factor that in. Look, this offensive line was a major issue for Georgia last year. They fixed, in my mind, their biggest issue, which was the inability to run the football. But I think there are some things that they can clean up in pass protection, especially because Gunner Stockton is just not the same pure quarterback that Carson Beck was a season ago. And this offensive line is going to need to help him. He did that in the running game. I don't necessarily know if we got that in the pass protection aspect.
And the tricky part about this situation, too, is now headed into week 2, we know that some of these guys aren't going to play, the ones that started on Saturday. And it's like, you've got to have this group ready by the time you get to Tennessee and Alabama. And now it kind of takes a step back with some of those guys being out. And we came into this season thinking it was one of Kirby Smart's healthiest teams that was impacted in game 1. And so the injuries are definitely going to have a long-term effect, I think, just because you want to see this group get more reps and build that chemistry together in these first 2 games. So I hate the fact that we're already talking about injured offensive linemen in week 2.
And this is something where, the Austin Peay game, it's not the worst thing in the world because these guys were going to get a lot of reps anyway. And so, I don't expect either the Green injury or the Gaston injury to be significant and long-term in that regard. But as Georgia gets into the meat of the SEC play, especially right off the bat where they go at Tennessee, home against Alabama in their first 2 games, that's where they're going to want to be healthy-ish, or at least forming some of that cohesion that they just didn't have a year ago. This group didn't gel. And so, by the end of the season, that really weighed on that offensive line a year ago. Well, yes, they were healthy for the Notre Dame game. They just hadn't played a lot together against a front that was able to take advantage of it. And so I think that's the thing to monitor with this offensive line. None of those injuries, Gaston, Green, even Michael Morris dealing with a bit of a hand injury. It's not something that's going to derail them for the season, but it does make it a little bit of a longer process in terms of this offensive line as a whole gelling and coming together.
And when it comes to those injuries specifically, that'll come up in our DawgBites segment later where we'll talk about what injuries you should really be concerned about and which ones that we might not see it impact the game over the next couple of weeks. I do want to focus on something that was really a positive in game 1, and that's the time that we got to see true freshmen play. 22 players made their debut in game 1. We got to see 2 start in Juan Gaston and Ethan Barbour. Want to continue to see that in Austin Peay specifically because we know that once the real SEC schedule starts, that's just not going to be the case. To talk about some specifics, I really love that Talon Taylor contributed early as a gunner, which I think is a good sign that Kirby Smart sees him as a hustler because we know that those positions are important to him. But I think I would like to see him make some more offensive contributions on Saturday.
Yeah, and he was someone who, there was a deep shot to him early in the game, but that obviously fell incomplete. I think of the freshman wide receiver, he's best positioned to make an immediate impact for Georgia, and I think his involvement on special teams only further backs that up. Another guy where he didn't start, but he made an impact pretty early on. Elijah Griffin making a tackle, not necessarily for loss, but for 0 yards right at the line of scrimmage. I think that's what you want to see from him as you try and build out depth there on that defensive line. What happens with Gaston is going to be interesting to watch moving forward. What does he look like as he gets back to health? Because I think Georgia pretty clearly views him as one of their 5 best offensive linemen Didn't play like it this past Saturday, but obviously the ceiling for him is incredibly high. And he's someone who, as he works through some of those freshman issues, you hope by the end of the season he can be a big time difference maker. So the injury there changes that a little bit, but I think you have to really like what you saw from the freshman, both early in the game, but also later on as well. Elias Williams catching a late touchdown in the win there. Thomas Blackshear catching a pass. Bo Walker getting a little bit of involvement, but not much. Maybe his star is a little bit dimmer than maybe we anticipated, but still a lot to like with this freshman class. And I think it was huge for this group that they got the opportunities that they did in this win over Marshall.
Yeah, I think that the biggest win coming out of that group was just the performances that we saw from the freshman tight ends and Elias Williams and Ethan Barbour, especially considering how stacked that group was, to see them get involved early on and to make an impact that we could see on paper. I think that was really big. You mentioned Bo Walker. We heard so much about him in the offseason. I thought maybe we would see a little bit more out of him on Saturday. I wasn't super impressed with what we saw from Chauncey Bowen, so maybe see a little bit more of Bo Walker getting involved against Austin Peay. And then I think when we look at the freshman defensive players, those are some of the ones I would like to see some big plays from on Saturday. We're talking a lot about the guys on the offense, but maybe names like Zayden Walker, Isaiah Gibson, Rayshawn Dinkins, more of Dominic Kelly. I want to be talking about the true freshman defensive players when we have this conversation next week.
Yeah, and the hard thing is, so, like Zayden Walker did some nice things on Saturday, but he's also got 4 NFL players ahead of him at that inside linebacker position. Dominic Kelly had another pass breakup, and this is a guy who if you've got stock out there in him, I'm trying to buy it up based on what we've seen with him in Sanford Stadium this far. But Alice Robinson, Daniel Harris, Dalen Everett, if healthy, are all going to be ahead of him on the depth chart and playing more snaps, not to mention DeMello Jones there as well. So defensively, yes, you like what you see in, and I do have a feeling we'll be able to talk about these guys, especially, they were responsible for giving up the shutout last week. But in terms of seeing contributions from them on the front end, I think right now only Elijah Griffin is in a position to really help this defense early on.
Did we ever officially confirm that Dominic Kelly was Georgia's 17-year-old?
I don't yet know that.
Well, if so, he really shined on Saturday. So that's something to be excited about. Last thing, and this is all going to be Gunner Stockton talk. It's the improvements from Gunner. Gunner on the ground, I'm really not that worried about it, but I'm just not sure how sustainable it is when they get into SEC play. You need to see more from him through the air. He had completed 14 of 24 with 190 yards, but just an average of 7.9 yards per throw and a completion rate of 58.3%. I think the numbers are a little bit skewed because of what Zach Branch did with his yards after catch, but we're going to need to see more of Gunner in the air as they get closer to SEC play.
Absolutely. Saturday was just the second time in Kirby Smart's tenure as a head coach at Georgia that a quarterback has logged 10 carries in a game. Dwan Mathis was the other one. So you're not going to see Georgia, I think, run Gunner Stockton 10 times over the course of the game during especially SEC play. So they're going to need to do more. And part of this is, I think, the game plan where they wanted to make things easy, get the ball out of his hands quick. They weren't really trying to push the football downfield all that often, and there were just limited attempts. I mentioned the pass attempt to Taylor earlier. There's one that maybe Noah Thomas could have gotten, maybe he was being interfered with on the play, but there weren't really a lot of attempts downfield trying to expand in that regard. But you do want to see a little bit more. And the problem is, we might have to wait until the Tennessee game to see this, because there's no real need for Georgia to put anything out there that might be useful to them. In a game against Austin Peay, they should win going away anyway.
And I want to ask you about something that Kirby Smart specifically said about Gunner Stockton, the offensive line, about how does he get better moving forward. And he says he needs to build that confidence and definitely trust in his offensive line. But one of the things that you and I talked about was how the offensive line needs to improve in their pass blocking. So do you feel like the Kirby Smart evaluation of trusting in the offensive line is fair if you and I are sitting here criticizing the pass blocking that they did on Saturday?
I think so, because look, Gunner, because of his running ability, I think he trusts that, hey, if it's not there immediately, I can get out of the pocket and pick up a few yards. I think the Notre Dame game last year kind of showed that he can't do that as often as maybe perhaps he thinks. And one of the things, that we saw under Carson, and look, not everything was rosy there, but he would stand in the pocket and make a play. And that's something that all the great quarterbacks find a way to do. And I do think that, because Gunner for so long has been able to rely on his legs, that's maybe a skill that hasn't been fully developed to this point in time. And so I do, you want to see Gunner stand in there a little bit longer and make a play, whether it be taking a hit, which he's shown he's more than capable of doing. but finding that balance of knowing, okay, this is when I can break out, and this is when maybe instead of rolling out of the pocket, I can step up and fire through a muddled pocket.
Connor, any final things that you want to see more of in game 2?
I think drops were something that we saw a little bit of. And look, Georgia's just going to be hypersensitive to this year, given they led the country in that stat a year ago. I thought Lawson Lucky had a bad one on third down that ended a drive. Dylan Bell arguably had another one where, yes, it was a tough play, but it's one that he should have made. Wasn't the biggest issue. And again, I think the quarterback and offensive line play was a much bigger concern than the passing offense. But you do want to see these receivers make plays. That's what made Zachariah Branch stand out so much on Saturday, where he wasn't doing a whole lot complex-wise in terms of the routes that he was running. It was 2 screen passes and a simple slant, but he turned that into 95 yards. So I think the wide receivers in particular, how do they go about catching the ball? Are they able to limit drops this week?
Yeah, for me, super quick, I also want to focus on something I want to see more of from the skill players, and this excludes Dwight Phillips Jr., and this will actually come up in my pregame show on Saturday. I want to see a runner that's not Gunner. Gunner did lead in rushing yards, which if you're a Georgia fan, that's so exciting to just even know that you have a quarterback that's able to move on the ground like that. But I really want to see more from the potential running back twos like the Bo Walker, Chauncey Bowens, potentially Josh McCray. Really want to see some of them get involved, and improvement from Nate Frazier from what we saw in week 1 as well. When we come back, we'll talk about the 2 freshmen that started in Saturday's game. We'll also talk about the Ryan Puglisi performance that we saw. And then is there a clear front runner for a potential national champion at the end of this year? But first, we want to remind you that here on DawgNation at Large, we are partnered with Zagoria Law Firm. And what makes them so unique is that they are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs, as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DawgBite, that's DOGBITE, or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. Now we'll do DawgBites. So we've talked a lot about Juan Gaston, not so much Ethan Barbour, who was credited for the start on Saturday. With Juan Gaston, I feel like it was highs and lows, not that much middle ground coming from him, but I was really surprised about the Ethan Barbour thing considering how stacked that room is. But I will give credit to Jeff Sentell, who did say that he is one of the most plug-and-play, college-ready guys in terms of just overall physicality.
Yeah, a guy that impressed immediately when he got to campus last December, standing out at some of Georgia's early bowl practices ahead of the Notre Dame game. And just because of his positional versatility, I think Georgia's going to be able to move around and do a lot of different things with him, complementing a variety of ways. Georgia fans, if you were paying attention, especially early in that game, you saw Barbour line up at fullback. We haven't seen a whole lot of that under Kirby Smart, but I know that there are a lot of old Georgia fans out there that were thrilled to see Georgia lining up in the I formation. Wasn't a successful play as Georgia got stopped on third down, but I think that speaks to how creative Mike Bobo can be with Barbour and using him in a variety of ways.
So last week we talked about what defines a successful game for Georgia opposed to what just like the final score is, and one of the things that you mentioned is that we wanted to see more of Ryan Puglisi, especially because he hasn't had any in-game reps, and now he suddenly steps into that QB2 role. It becomes a bigger becomes more important within the offense. He completed 5 of his 8 pass attempts for 59 yards and a touchdown. I'm not gonna lie, I was really impressed with what we saw from Puglisi.
Yeah, he was confident. He got the ball out of his hands quickly. I thought he showed a little bit more athleticism than maybe perhaps I had anticipated that he had. I was unfamiliar with his game in that regard, to quote Shaq. And so this game, again, similar. You want to see Georgia get out to a big lead early. You want to see him inserted in the third quarter, get at least a drive or two where he is pushing the ball downfield and doing things that a quarterback, if thrust into the game, are going to be asked to do. Because if Gunnar Stockton's going to carry the ball 10 times in a game, and look, who knows if it gets that high on a consistent basis, but I do think you're going to see 5-6 rushing attempts a week from Gunnar. That opens him up to a lot of hits, a lot of wear and tear and injury. And as the SEC championship game showed last year, Puglisi needs to be ready at a moment's notice. And so, while yes, it's a very different world throwing passes against Marshall and Austin Peay than it is Tennessee and Alabama, it's still a positive for him. And the fact that he looked as good as he did, I think only further backs up why Georgia didn't go out and add someone via the transfer portal this offseason.
Yeah, and I think from what we saw from him on G-Day, definitely massively forward for Ryan Puglisi. I want to talk about the AP poll for a little bit, and not because of where Georgia's ranking is. I mean, at this early in the season and who they played, like the ranking really doesn't matter. They've got them at number 4 currently. Ohio State moves up to 1, Penn State at 2. LSU makes a humongous leap to number 3, as well as Miami. They also make a big jump to number 5. But I know it's early in the season for an AP poll, but even just looking at the 10 teams that are on the screen here, I don't know who the front runner would be to win a national championship. I know that there are teams that played tougher games in week 1, but I really wasn't truly impressed with anybody.
Yeah, Ohio State found a way to win, but I have a lot of questions about how they looked offensively. Miami, again, nice win over Notre Dame, did a great job in the second and third quarters there, but man, that fourth quarter was extremely conservative and I think very worrying in a close game against a good team later in the season. And even LSU, I was really impressed with how they played in the second half of that game against Clemson. But the fact that Clemson was still in a position where they had a chance to tie it shows that they have some things to clean up moving forward as well. So I think this just goes to show you, in this age of college football, we are being pulled more towards the middle than we have in the past. We used to have 3 or 4 teams that you would consider elite. This year, you look at that schedule, and based on what we saw coming out of week 1, with maybe the exception of South Carolina, I could see all 9 of those teams on there playing for a national championship this year and finding a way to go make a deep run into the January month.
Yeah, so you mentioned South Carolina. I don't see them as a national championship contender either, but I did go to that game. And now I have a way better understanding of why the South Carolina fan base is the way that they are, because it goes back to this idea of it's really high highs for South Carolina and really low lows. There's no middle ground. So I can understand the anxiety and the feelings that come along with being a South Carolina fan. It makes a lot more sense to me having now watched a game of theirs in person.
Yeah, and that's a South Carolina team where, it's pretty clearly, on Dylan Stewart and Lenora Sellers to be the best player on the field every single week. And, that can win you a lot of games. Is it going to make them deep enough to, I think, have the sustained run that you would need? No. But can it help you get into the college football playoff? I think that is certainly on the capable, because Sellers and Stewart are that uniquely talented.
All right, so let's move on to the injuries. I feel like after the game, Kirby Smart was pretty vague, especially when it came to the Dalen Everett injury. Based on what you know and what you've heard, what are the ones that we actually need to be concerned about?
Yeah, I think the only one that is interesting to me right now would be the Juan Gaston injury. I think if Georgia were playing Tennessee this week, I think Ernest Green would be full go. I think Dalen Everett would be full go. With Gaston, it sounds a little bit like it's an MCL injury. I saw him earlier on campus on Tuesday in a boot and with a brace on his left knee while he was also riding around on a scooter. God bless that scooter that is holding up a lot of weight at that size. But, you wonder if that's an MCL injury. I don't know if we're going to see him against Tennessee. Maybe you see him against Alabama, but I don't know. Even as anemic as Alabama looked, I don't know if that's necessarily a game you want to throw him in there, especially if he's not 100%. So coming out of week 1, I think the injury to me that stands out the most right now is Juan Gaston, a guy that I think they have very high expectations for and want him on the field. And so the fact that he's dealing with a knee injury already, I think might slow his progress and development down.
All right, so we're going to do this every single week. What are the week 2 games that you're most looking forward to watching?
I think it's the Michigan-Oklahoma game, and I think, this does not measure up to the top games from last week, but given that Texas lost to Ohio State and given that Alabama lost to Florida State, I think the SEC kind of needs this game from a perception standpoint, because even though I think Oklahoma is maybe the 8th or 9th best team in this league, they are still ranked in the top 25. And if you keep dropping these games, where yes, LSU got one against Clemson, but if you keep dropping these games on a national standpoint, where this is, I think, the most interesting game of the week and certainly the most high profile, you start getting, the belief in your conference chipped away a bit as you try to get more and more conference bids for the college football playoff. That becomes harder. And so it's a game I think Oklahoma should win, but Michigan's got enough talent, and Bryce Underwood has got a ton of pizzazz to him, that I think that they can make this a game. And it's an Oklahoma team that had a lot of questions a season ago. And if they don't answer them this week, it gets really dicey for Brent Venables. And I think the criticism of the SEC only gets even louder.
Yeah, going from having the best college football week 1 ever to now week 2. The obvious choice is Michigan and Oklahoma. But I want to give a shout out to my alma mater, Kennesaw State, who held the final score with them in Wake Forest was 10-9. They play Indiana this weekend. Kurt Signetti's had a lot to say about scheduling opponents and taking shots at the SEC. So I'm just excited to see what the final score ends up being on that game. I don't expect Kennesaw to pull off the upset by any means, but maybe they can keep it closer than a lot of people think. So I will definitely be watching that game. On Saturday, we also have a lot of coverage involving Georgia's games, including the DawgNation pregame and DawgNation postgame. I do the DawgNation pregame at Jittery Joe's, the downtown location. It's always 2 hours before the start of the game, so if you're in Athens, come and join us. And then, of course, Brandon Adams hosts the DawgNation postgame at the Georgia Bookstore, which, by the way, looks absolutely incredible. I hadn't seen it until last Saturday, and it was gorgeous inside. So you can stop by the bookstore and visit with Brandon, or you can join him via Zoom after the game as well to give your opinions and thoughts. And if you want to get notified anytime that DawgNation goes live, that way you can remember when we do these shows, make sure you hit the bell by the subscribe button, and that way it'll send you an alert, and that way you can join us for DawgNation pregame or postgame. I've been so excited for this meme machine. It took me probably 30 minutes to pick which one I was going to use. It probably wasn't the best one, but it was the most appropriate for the show. I'm excited to see what everybody else has. This is Meme Machine.
Who's that going down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a meme machine and Red Flag. It's a meme machine and Red Flag.
What's up?
I like that smile on your face. You seem excited.
It was a great week for internet trolling.
Connor, pressure's on.
I am so
first.
excited for this. There are other memes that I had to leave out because I don't necessarily know if they want to go with what our show is about. But I'm very, very excited about what we have this week.
All right, well, you're going to kick us off. What you got?
I had to start with Arch Manning. I'm obviously a big Sopranos fan. Peyton at home watching Arch. And then this is Junior Soprano, obviously of Sopranos fame. Tony, his nephew, my nephew running things, not in his life. Just very, very funny to imagine how Peyton was watching Arch. A very disappointing first effort from Arch where, again, he was never going to live up to the expectations that were unfairly placed on him. But some of the things he didn't do, and specifically the accuracy with which he struggled in this game, I think were pretty eye-opening in that regard. There were a couple other ones, one in particular comparing Arch Manning to Jeb Bush that I found pretty funny. But we're going to go with the Sopranos reference, checking multiple boxes there of mine.
Coach 30 had a really good one about him. We hold a passing camp every year in this Manning family.
I think apart from like Bill Belichick, UNC, I would put that as number one. Just collectively, the topics for like best memes, Arch was by far number 2. So many shots taken. I loved all the ones of like Quinn Ewers realizing that Arch is not better than him. Like those were all really great. So I liked a bunch of those as well. Cody.
All right, so I really wanted to go with the Alabama guy, right, holding up the finger. We decided the DawgNation standards and practices told us we couldn't do that. So we are going to go with, like you guys said, you let off the show with it. It is what people are talking about. But to me, the TCU trolling of all the UNC stuff, the official TCU football account, this isn't Joe Blow in his mom's basement. No, this is the official Horned Frogs account. Babe, wake up. Bill Belichick coaches college football today. Babe, go back to sleep. And then you've got excited to showcase our program this fall on Hulu from Carolina football. And they say, when does episode 1 come out? So I love that TCU was trolling them. The thing about this, though, for me, like TCU, like, y'all been blown out too before, and they've had so many memes, like the dogs eating chicken wings, which is on the meme machine intro, right? That's from the TCU game. So they've had this pent up energy for years, just waiting to get a blowout go in their favor so they can start doing that.
Nobody had a better day on social media than TCU football. It was amazing to watch in real time too. All right,
Kaylee.
I got it. So
it's come down to you.
I know this one. I think we're friends with Dan Young. Yes, I loved this one that immediately went viral of the ref at the Georgia game, watching the replay, and he's actually watching himself. And Dan said, how I replay conversations in my head 1 hour later, which is so true. I especially do it when it comes to this show. Like after the show is over, I spend so much time thinking about all the things that I should have said or all the comebacks that I could have had. And this one just hit just right. But that was an instant classic of a meme coming out of the game.
Yeah. Do you think, Kaylee, you're gonna second guess your touchdown pick an hour after the game after we finish it this week?
I'm probably gonna play it safe this week just to get some points on the board. I wouldn't go back and change. If I had to change my pick from last week, I wouldn't have done it. I felt pretty good about it, but I'm probably gonna play it pretty safe this week.
Okay.
Smart. Yeah. When you talk about replaying conversations, I've won so many arguments after the fact in the shower. I just went off on this people, and never came to fruition.
Yeah, hypotheticals should be scared of me in the car ride on the way home from anything.
Exactly.
All right, so this is something so special. I cannot even believe that we're going to do this. Our good friend Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, came to us with a stellar idea, and the fact that he even trusts in us to do this, it's amazing. You guys are going to enjoy this so much. This is Name That Dawg with Brandon Adams.
Name That Dawg!
Surprise! We have a very special guest here on today's episode of DawgNation at Large, twice in 1 month, I might add. Welcome in, Brandon Adams.
Thank you very much. Let me just say two things here real quick. Have you ever ridden like the back seat of your own car where it feels just really weird? I'm in this studio every single day, but I never sit in this spot. It feels very strange to be just slightly a different spot than I normally am. That's point one. Here is point two. I apologize. I get plenty of airtime as it is. I don't mean to be encroaching on somebody else's show, but I am both a proud and yet humble person, hold myself to a high standard. I also am more than happy to be honest when I don't meet that standard. And it occurred to me this week that I have a problem that I think can only be helped by our friends here at DawgNation DawgNation at Large, and that is why I am here today.
Yeah, it's not very often that you come to us with an idea. Usually it's me coming to you with something, but you approached me and Connor and Cody Saturday right after the Dawg Walk about an issue that you were having. Kind of explain the background behind this.
Well, I'm embarrassed. I'm truly embarrassed because, as I said before, I try to hold myself to a high standard. I like doing a good job. One of the venerable traditions we have around DawgNation, to overstate it, is the Dawg Walk video. I've been doing that for almost as long as I've been at DawgNation. And yet, for some reason, I don't 100% know why this is. Maybe I'm just getting older. I don't know. But over the course of the last few years, I find myself recognizing by face, on spec, fewer and fewer of the Georgia players. Now, let me tell you something. You may never have hosted a Dawg Walk video before, but let me tell you what works out to be pretty difficult. When you're trying to narrate a video, if you don't recognize a good number of the Georgia players, and listen, I'm in the studio all the time. I'm not covering the team from Athens on a day-to-day basis. That's my excuse here. But I just find myself tap dancing and filling a lot more on this video than I used to. I don't know that it's yet obvious to the audience. It should be, because I did not do a good job of this on Saturday, where I'm getting this guy and that guy, but missing this entire dozen players walking through. And it's time for me to get better at this. And so I view this time on this show as a little bit of a public intervention, a chance to say, BA, it's got to be at least a little bit better than this.
Here's the thing. I don't think that you should feel as guilty about it. The one person on our staff that I feel like really knows these people without their helmets on and with their jersey numbers on is Connor, because Connor is at the press conferences every single week. So apart from Connor, I don't think that there's any guilt that you should feel. It's okay. We mostly see them on the field and not in their like normal people clothing.
So to make people fully understand what we're talking about, and Connor, you're right. I mean, she's right. You are so much better at this than I am. And maybe, honestly, maybe you should host a video. So maybe I'll just come to the game later.
Connor for Dawg Walk.
and Connor can host the video. But to give people a true understanding of what we're talking about here, maybe we should give them a little taste of it. Does it sound good?
Yeah, so what we're going to do, we're going to show an example video first. We've got 3 guys to show Brandon. The first one's going to be an example. It's going to roll through, show some of the guys that Brandon got right. Then there will be a question mark where you're going to have to name that player. So first off, here's the example one from Saturday. This was probably the obvious one that Brandon missed. We'll show it to you here.
See tight end Oscar Delp on his way in.
Nailed it.
Here comes Monroe Freeling.
Nailed that one.
Always enjoy the fashion choices here How about the fact that if the first time in a while we're going to see a double-breasted suit?
Okay.
Oh.
Let me just be honest
PA.
here. If I'm going to the fashion choice and the double-breasted suit, that means I'm filling to try to figure out who this is. Connor, how disappointed are you that I didn't get this one?
That's tough. That's pretty clearly Lawson Lucky.
Yeah, it's a much better. I mean, that's a pretty prominent player. That's a guy that plays a lot. Shamefully, I covered Lawson in high school. That's clearly one that I should. Now, I was also pretty enamored because, as I said, double-breasted suits are back in. I think that's a fun fashion choice. So, in fairness, I was somewhat enamored by the very interesting choice of the brass buttons and the double-breasted suit. I get into all that kind of stuff. But you can't not know Lawson Lucky. That's just a bad job.
But you did go 1 for 2 on the tight ends. You got Oscar Delp right there off the bat. But yeah, that was probably the one I was most surprised by. But that's okay. That's our example because I think after the fact, BA quickly realized who that was. It wasn't a matter of not knowing his space. So
that's what we'll go with anyway.
Yeah, we'll give you credit where credit is due.
We'll say that.
But now it's time for the real test.
I'm so nervous about it. I've been nervous about this all day long.
Let's.
I almost, Connor, regretted immediately once I realized we were actually going to do this. I almost regretted immediately the idea that I even pitched this as an idea. I have butterflies in my stomach right now.
I'll say this, if the video that we just saw is what we're using, BA next to the camera, he's able to narrate a little bit more, get a straight on look. I saw a lot of side profiles there where I was able to pick out, the ones that you rolled through there. But from the side, this might not be the slam dunk that I think Kaylee has set this up to be.
Okay, I'm very nervous.
Well, let's just go ahead and get into it. Let's roll the first clip.
All right.
KJ Bolden coming in right there.
See, I know KJ because I
As
saw
Gunnar
him in high
Stockton
school.
prepares to make his first start.
I
for
got
Georgia.
Gunnar.
Got to.
Oh, no.
Oh, BA.
Oh, no. I'm telling you, I don't know these guys by spec. I don't know their faces. I don't have, with all due respect to that young man and his family, I don't have any idea who that is.
Can I give you a hint? He has a lot of starting experience, multi-year starter.
I don't doubt that. Seems like a great player. I'm sure I'm a big fan of his. But by face, I don't have any idea who that is, and I'm not too proud to admit that. By the end of the year, I promise I will identify that guy and say, there he is. But by face, I don't know.
After today, I promise you will not miss this one again because he has appeared on the show in clips. This is Dalen Everett.
Is that right?
Who did not play in the first game
That's
due
right.
to injury. But yes, this is Dalen Everett, number 6, cornerback senior. He's out
Yeah,
of
and if he's
Norfolk,
walking
Virginia.
by wearing the red jersey and number 6, well, of course, at that point in time, we're all about it. We can talk about the SEC championship and the great success that he had there and what he can do this year and how healthy his ankle is. But as he walks by quickly, looking at that face, I'm going to be pivoting towards something else.
Connor, is this excusable or not?
That's tough. Now,
That's a bad one.
different hairstyle
Is this
from
true?
what the Georgia Dogs website is. Man, if we're starting missing Lawson Lucky and Dalen Everett, there are 40 new players on this Georgia roster this year. So there are some of these names we're just, we don't have the FaceTime with them. Everett and Lucky are tough ways to start.
Nothing that you're saying is unfair. And ultimately, that's why we're doing this right now, is because I want to own this. Because honestly, the public, the folks that tune in, deserve better than whatever that was on Saturday.
All right, we'll go ahead and give you the chance to redeem yourself. Here's clip number 2.
Jackson coming through.
Can't miss him.
Yeah, it's
Elijah
not.
Griffin now coming through.
I don't know. And I'll tell you this, I think Cody fed me Elijah Griffin. I'm ashamed to say. Once again, I'm sure I'm a big fan of this young man. I no doubt am. I don't know who that is.
Before we reveal it, Connor, just like a yes or no, do you happen to know who this is?
I have a feeling, but I don't dead on know who this is.
The only reason that I think I
Do
knew
you
who this is, I knew who this was because I do the recruiting show Before the Hedges with Jeff.
Sure you do.
I had
Okay,
to see
I
his
have a
face
guess.
a
I do-
ton last year.
All right, go ahead, Connor.
Connor,
I have a guess. I think that's Isaiah Gibson.
it is Isaiah Gibson.
That's cool. Okay, so you know what I'm realizing here? We obviously, on our show, we play clips from these guys all the time. I think the problem is I'm such a robot. I'm just waiting for my turn to talk again that I don't think I'm actually paying close enough attention to the clips that we're playing. That may be the issue. We've played stuff from Isaiah Gibson throughout his recruitment, or certainly a million times with Dalen Everett. I don't think I'm paying enough attention to the clips that we're showing on DawgNation Daily, because clearly I'm not internalizing what I'm looking at, because Isaiah Gibson, huge fan, unbelievable career. Sky's the limit. Future is so bright. By face, might as well just be another guy on the street.
I think you can remember Isaiah Gibson next time because his hair is pretty distinctive and he's got really strong facial structure in his bones.
So here's the thing. To the entirety of the Georgia roster, you cannot change your hairstyle the rest of the season. Like, I'm going to use this video as a template for all future dog walks. I need you to maintain the same hairstyle throughout the rest of the season. Otherwise, I probably have no choice. No hope.
I'm just going to go ahead and let you know that if you didn't get the first two, you're definitely not going to get this one. This was the only one that Cody and I really had to look through the roster and figure it out. But this will be a learning lesson for all of DawgNation on who this player is. Here's clip number 3.
There's Michael Ewini coming through here.
I mispronounced
Cole
that.
comes by.
I think I got fed that one too.
The outfit really stood out.
That
on
is
this
a
one.
sharp. Can I say fit? Am I too old to say fit?
No, you got it.
That is a sharp fit. First of all, once again, I'm a big fan of classic style. This is a 3-piece suit. You see the vest underneath the 2-button jacket, kind of a wider collared shirt, really nice knot on the tie. That is such a sharp look. That is a man that clearly has a fashion sense. A lot of these guys have money now, but in addition to that, it takes a fashion sense to really look good. That is a truly sharp-dressed man right there. But if you gave me 10 guesses, I don't know what his name is. I know the player. I don't know the face.
I also really love that the rims or like the things on the side of the glasses match the white button up too. I think that just adds a little extra oomph.
To look that cool at any point in time in my life, I would love to even approach looking that cool at any moment. I never will. That is a guy that looks cool. I only wish I could identify and give proper credit to what is obviously a pretty nice game day fit there.
Connor, do you know who it is?
I have a I am more confident in this guess than I was in the last guess.
This would be a tremendous pull. I want to hear what you have to say.
Is this Chris Jones?
This is Chris Jones.
Let's go.
Wow.
How about that?
Wow. Number 28. He's an inside linebacker, redshirt freshman out of Virginia. We had to do some real digging because here in this picture, he doesn't have that same beard like he does there.
It is different.
But by far the best dress that I saw out of all these videos.
That's a great suit. And in all honesty, I do enjoy watching the way the guys dress before the game. And Chris Jones is a guy. We've certainly heard good things about him going back to the summer. Had a nice scrimmage, we're told, at one point in time. And we think he's got a really awesome opportunity at the outside linebacker spot. I can talk for days about the play. I just wish I was a little bit better at recognizing the face.
Here's the thing, though. Go ahead. You got it.
I want to defend BA here a little bit because he's not the only media member that struggled to place who was who. Post-game press conference, we get interviews. They spread the 6-7 guys we get out. They bring out a very marquee player, but granted one that was new to the program. And myself in front of the show, Ben Wolk, were the only two that instantly recognized him off the bat.
Oh, wow.
And so we got a few minutes of just the two of us talking to Zachariah Branch. And I think it speaks to just the newness of this team, how young this team is, how little people know about this team. That just even someone like Zachariah Branch, who you see him in the number 1 jersey, that's a bit of a cursed jersey here at the University of Georgia, but had a great debut on Saturday. You think with how he played, everyone would want to hound him. I don't think a lot of people knew what he looked like without the helmet, without the jersey number on Saturday. So this is not just limited to BA and not knowing who is who on this Georgia football team.
When I was very young and got a chance to go to the press box for among the first times as a media member, distinguished member of the broadcast media, got a chance to go to the locker room after the game, and to date myself here, Thomas Davis was playing at Georgia and played a joke on the other media. He and another player, and I forget which one, switched jerseys before the post game. Back then it was just a scrum. You just go stick the microphone up there. They switched jerseys, and I was young enough. I didn't. I mean, obviously Thomas Davis, a very recognizable face, but at that time a lot of guys got confused by the fact that as a joke, Davis and another player switched jerseys. And so I am begging these Georgia players, if I ever do come to a post game, please don't switch jerseys because I'm having a hard enough time as it is.
So Cody, chiming in, I'm the one who shoots this video every week. I will tell you, Brandon does love. He absolutely
Oh, my
loves
gosh,
when a
Cody's
guy's got
so
his
right.
name on his chain.
Oh,
Big fan of that. If he could encourage any Georgia player, get Michael Uni. You're going to get called out every game this year, just like Nazir Stackhouse a year ago, because
so
he got his name on his chain.
that is so true. The guys that do have their initials on their chain, I am so thankful. Listen, Cody and I have done this now for a little while together. He knows the truth. If I see the chain and the initials, that is my guy. He's getting name checked on the show. If more guys could do that, that would actually be awesome.
I know you got to get out of here, but I do have one final thought on all this. You may not be ecstatic with the results of today, but one thing I was really impressed by in listening to these is your ability to narrate fashion. That's not easy at all, but you make it look easy. So you may not be able to name that dog, but I could see you calling the Met Gala one day.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, people don't realize 'cause I wear the same clothes every day. I do like clothes. I like fashion. I like to see the great-looking suits. I mean, I think that's actually a really cool thing, not wearing the jerseys, wearing whatever fashion choice the guys want to make. It just makes someone like me, who's, to be honest, not that smart to begin with, it just makes my job a little bit more difficult. But now that we've done this, I would say it's going to get easier in the future. Or if it doesn't, at least everybody can laugh along with the rest of my colleagues as I fumble and fail my way through all of this.
And one of the things that we're really good about doing here on DawgNation at Large is what we call an accountability check. So we're going to bring you back a couple months
By all
from now.
means.
We're going to show some of these clips again and see if you actually remembered the things that you learned today.
I would expect nothing less.
Well, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us in another edition of Name That Dawg. I thought that Brandon did a good job with the Dawg Walk stuff because it is way harder than it looks. It really is. I think the only one that I'm a little bit disappointed about in his performance was Dalen Everett.
Dalen and Loss, and like he'll tell you this. You just have to get those guys. Like Isaiah Gibson, first game, totally understandable. Chris Jones, someone we haven't talked a lot about, can definitely understand that. You got to get the big name guys. That just can't happen. And, hey, look, they say you make the biggest improvements from game 1 to game 2. I'm sure BA and Cody are going to have that Dawg Walk crisp. So many guys named and ready to go.
No, though, without Cody's help on Saturday, what is the likelihood that when we go back and watch the Dawg Walk, all 3 of those guys will be named directly?
Absolutely. Look, he's going to make sure that he gets Chris Jones, Isaiah Gibson, and Dalen Everett this week.
Sorry, Brandon. I say he goes 2 for 3 on the ones that we learned from this week. Just because I know Brandon and how his mind works. So I'm going to say he goes 2 for 3, and I feel like even that's being generous. Okay, let's do touchdown predictions. I'll just go ahead and say it. I am the only person who did not get theirs correct last week. Give credit to Connor for his pick in Dwight Phillips, and then Cody and his pick for the Gunnar Stockton rushing touchdown, which brings the score right now. It's early. A lot of ball left to play. Connor now has 1. Cody now has 1. And I have 0. And I am okay with that because it's early in the season. So what we'll do each week is we will just move up in the ranks. So Cody, you'll have the first pick this week. I'll take number 2. Connor, you go to the bottom, and then it'll progress like that each week. So Cody, if you would like to make your first pick, have it.
Ooh, this is such a tough pick because I think later in the season, you said the rule this year is you can only use a guy 3 times, right?
You can only use it
so
3 times.
Part of me is like, I don't want to burn one of those big names early, but I cannot see Nate Frazier going 2 games without scoring a touchdown. So I'm going to go Nate Frazier. When I get the benefit of the first pick, I got to take it. I'll go Nate Frazier this week.
Yeah, this week I'm just hoping to put some points on the board, and I feel like in this second game, I would also take another Gunnar Stockton rushing touchdown. So I'm going to play it a little bit safe this week. I'm going to take that as my pick. Connor.
I am going to go with Jaden Riddell getting a touchdown.
Ooh, spicy.
I'm going to take, look, you guys make a great case for using one of the early guys, Kaylee to get on the board, Cody maybe to extend the lead. I don't think I'm going to use Jaden Riddell a whole lot this season. I know late last week, Elias Williams caught a touchdown pass. I think Georgia's going to want to get him involved in the game, especially to get a chance to throw the ball around with Ryan Puglisi late in this game. So I like Jaden Riddell. Might have to wait a little bit. Didn't have to wait long on Dwight Phillips last week.
No, you did not.
But I think Jaden Riddell, sort of in a reverse of what happened with Kaylee last week, where if Oscar Delp didn't score early, it was clear just he wasn't going to score at all. So I'm going to use, again, a flyer this week, not someone I expect to use a whole lot this season. I'm going to take Jaden Riddell to get a touchdown this week.
Yeah, so obviously different approaches and strategies to our touchdown picks this week. I don't know why, but I got a little bit of like chills when you said Jaden Riddell, which makes me feel even worse that this pick is going to come through for you, and that would just be my worst nightmare in week 2. But you know what? I like this new format of not being able to use the same guys because it allows for picks like Jaden Riddell where we have to be a little bit more creative.
All right, guys, take us home.
All right, Connor, what'd you learn today?
I learned that I know this team a little bit better than I thought I did, because going through Name That Dawg, I was a little bit worried and concerned. Like, I think you even saw that with the indecisiveness when it came to Isaiah Gibson. So for me to be able to pull those names out, and like, look, it's just hard. You know, I mentioned the stat, 40 newcomers on this team, a lot of guys that just have not played a lot of football. You know, look, totally understandable to not know every name and face on this team just yet.
Chris Jones was like the pull of the year. Like, if that would have been the only one that I thought maybe would stump you, because Cody and I had to really double check to even just like make sure that's who it was. That was tremendous work by you. So we will give you your flowers. There's also one other thing that I want to mention before we go really quick, and that's Connor and I go head to head in fantasy football this week. Of course, out of every person in the league, Connor and I get matched up game 1, and you've got a higher percentage to win than I do. But I'm like, it's just, of course, the world wants this to happen to us. And I hope that whatever happens, it doesn't affect, you know, our show next week whenever I win.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I guess you're betting against. Wait, no, I don't have. I thought
You don't have Brock Bowers.
I know. But hey, you know, I need a big week from the Cincinnati Bengals offense. I've loaded up on them,
Yes.
and so we're just hoping to get a little win here in fantasy week 1.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see how it plays out. DawgNation, thank you so much for joining us here on DawgNation at Large. Big week next week for Georgia football. I'm sure our show will also reflect that. And make sure you tune into the DawgNation pregame show on Saturday to see if Brandon Adams actually gets those pick rights within the Dawg Walk. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.